Hi there guys, got a little video overview on a new rifle coming to the channel, and the rifle that we're going to be taking a look at is a kalibrgun Cricket 2 Tactical. This particular rifle is a 177 sub-12 rifle fitted with the sky blue laminate kit. The rifle was purchased using my own money from the Crawley surplus store. We buy all our rifles from the Crawley surplus store because in my opinion they're the best RFD in the country. People that work there are fantastic, the shop itself is brilliant, and I really do like the service that they provide. They have recently launched a brand new website which is a lot faster and a lot nicer to use than the old one, and you can find that in the link in the description below. The only other thing that I want to mention is that we were supposed to be doing the Ghost on the channel, but unfortunately getting a long 177 Ghost at the moment is proving a little difficult, so we decided to just get a different rifle and then to do the Ghost afterwards. But don't worry, the Ghost is coming. With that said though, we can begin on with the kalibrgun. So there's plenty of other videos on YouTube showing the basic specifications, so what we're going to do is skip over that and go straight to the things we like about the rifle and some of the things we dislike about it. First thing I really like is the laminate stock options. There's quite a few colours to choose from, and if you don't like the laminates you can just go with plain boring wood, but I always like a bit of colour so we went with the sky blue. They also do a very nice orange which we was looking at instead of the sky blue. But as the blue is the same colour as our Shed Wolf, we decided to go with the blue. The next thing I want to mention is how the rifle feels. So it's the first thing I noticed when I picked it up, how chunky and solid the rifle feels overall. There's no rattles, no knocks, no sort of loose parts on the rifle. It's just a real solid bit of kit. It is fairly chunky at 3.5 kilograms, but that weight feels really nice when you're actually shooting the rifle. Another thing I really like is that they've actually gone ahead and done fat grips for the rifle. So I have fairly big hands and these grips are pretty much perfect for me. They're a lot thicker than a standard sort of AR grip, although they're roughly the same size as an ergo grip or something similar. Although at this point I will mention that you can't swap out the grips for a AR style grip, as the mounting location and mounting point is different. The inletting for the grips is fairly simple, so you could probably get a stock maker to do that for you fairly easily, but you can't just swap these grips out for a standard AR one. That said though, I don't see a reason why you would need to. These grips are perfectly serviceable and they feel really nice in the hand. The next thing I quite like is the trigger. It is a bullpup trigger which aren't renowned to be the best, as they use a linkage rather than a direct connection to the sears, but this one is perfectly serviceable. It's a 2-stage trigger that is adjustable and it does the job perfectly well. The blade is plastic, but that doesn't really bother me. I know that bothers some people, but for me that's not a big deal at all. The next thing I really like about the rifle is that it has an incredibly large air capacity. So whilst it's only got a 360cc bottle, it does have an extra 100cc's in this area here. What that means is that although you have a smaller bottle on the front, you're getting roughly the same amount of air capacity as something like an FX Impact, a Crate L or a Long Ghost or anything like that. Next thing I really like about this rifle are the magazines. So if we take a close look at one of the magazines here, you can see it's not a wind round magazine. Now I much prefer this style as it's mechanically indexed and it doesn't use the pellet to sort of locate the magazine. The main advantage to this style of magazine is that there's less chance of the pellet being damaged before it's entered into the barrel. Because the pellet isn't being used as a magazine stop, it's held nice and securely just in the hole there, secured via an O-ring, so it's nice and secure and it's not going to get damaged in the loading procedure. An added bonus is that the 2 magazines that come with a rifle can be stored just in this little pocket in the side of the stock. At the front here we do also have a forward mounted position for your bipod, so this little rail here, although a little small, is perfectly serviceable. There's not a lot of spring in that or anything like that, and it just moves the mounting point of the bipod forward slightly, which makes it a lot easier to shoot off the bench. Rifles with a bipod mounted just in front of the trigger tend to be a little twitchy, so an extended rail on the front there from factory is always welcomed. Next up, the cocking lever is swappable from right to left hand side. It is a fairly simple job and the instructions are shown in the little instruction booklet that you get with the rifle. For me, I always like my cocking on the right hand side, but you could swap it if you wanted to. Next up, we'll talk about the barrel. So the barrel is shrouded, and the shroud does have a 1/2" UNF on the end. CZ at the moment are my go-to barrel, and I have not had a bad one yet. And if we take a quick look at the range results here, you can see why I like CZ barrels so much. So this is all done at 50 yards, and these are all 5-shot groups. So 5-shot groups at 50 yards, and if we take a look at some of these ones at the bottom here, we see some nice tight groupings. That's probably a 10mm group edge to edge, maybe 10.5, so a 6.5 or 6mm group centre to centre. Really quite impressive from an out-the-box gun that's not been touched whatsoever. So nice and accurate. With that all said, that's pretty much all the main features of the rifle that I thought would be interesting to point out. What we'll do now is go on to some of the things I dislike about the rifle, or some of the things I want to point out to you as negatives. Now before we get into this, I do want to mention that I do really like this rifle, and none of the things I mention here are going to be deal breakers. They're just things I observed as we were shooting the rifle. So first things first, whilst the actual air capacity of the rifle is fairly large, you do get a relatively low shot count, or I experienced a relatively low shot count. From a 200 bar fill, this rifle will accept a 300 bar fill, but from a 200 bar fill, I was only getting around 280 shots. Now from a 480cc air capacity, I would expect sort of at least 300 shots, if not closer to 400. And although the rifle is phenomenally accurate and fairly consistent, that does tell me that there's something wrong with the setup, which does lead me into my next point. When you've got your head on the rifle and firing the rifle downrange, you do hear a fair amount of twang from the hammer spring. I'm not quite sure how well this is going to pick up on camera, but when we pull the trigger, I don't know if you'll be able to hear that, but you do get a fair amount of twang and a bit of crashing around in the back here. Without having had a look at the rifle or taken it apart in any way, what it sounds like to me is that it's oversprung and gated by the transfer port. What I expect to find when we take it apart is a transfer port restrictor in the block there somehow, and that's how they're going to be controlling the power. Now that's at a pure guess at the moment, but that is what it sounds like to me. So hopefully after a little bit of experimentation and a little bit of poking around inside, we'll get to the bottom of that and we should be able to get this rifle up to the sort of 400 shot mark. Although having said that, if we filled the rifle up to 300 bar, we'd get a lot more shots anyway. But to fill a rifle up to 300 bar consistently, you really do need a compressor, and most people aren't going to have compressors, they're just going to be filling off a dive cylinder, so that's why we do it from 200 bar rather than 300 bar. The next thing I want to have a little moan about is the loading of the magazines. So to load a magazine, you simply need to pull the cock and arm back, take your magazine, pull this little lever back here, and then insert the magazine cog side faced backwards, so like this way. Get that lined up, line everything up, give it a little wiggle, and then push this little lever forward again. Now it's fine to do with two hands, although it is fairly fiddly to do with one. That's not a problem for me as I shoot off a bench, so I've always got the rifle rested on a bipod, but I could see this being a little fiddly if you was out in the field, maybe it was cold or dark or something similar. Not a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination, but something I wanted to point out to you. The only other thing that I want to mention in regards to sort of little niggly points is the 20 MOA that's built into the top rail here. Now for those who don't know, 20 MOA of adjustment in the rail is done for longer range shooting, FAC use, and it just simply means that the scope rail is not parallel with the barrel, it's pointed down towards it slightly. That's done to compensate for projectile drop over longer distances, although for sub-12 use it can cause problems, and for that reason I did need to use adjustable mounts to get my rifle zeroed correctly. That's not a problem that's unique to the kalibrgun cricket though. I did need to use adjustable mounts on both the crate and the Uragan too. And the very last little niggly point I want to mention is the gauge. So the gauge isn't lined up properly, it's slightly off to one side. I would have liked to see that at 12 o'clock, but that's not a big deal, I'll sort that out later. That's pretty much it for my sort of good and bad points on the rifle. I really do like it, I think it's a fantastic little rifle, it's nice and accurate, fairly consistent, and overall really quite nice to shoot. Really impressed with the CZ barrel on this rifle, it really loved JSB Express pellets. or the Air Arms Express equivalent, and from a complete magazine, so 14 shots, the regulator was working perfectly well. We was averaging sort of a 10 to 15 feet per second deviation over those 14 shots, which from a rifle straight out the box using unweighed unsalted pellets is really quite good. And even over longer shot strings, I did 100 shots with this rifle over the chronograph, and the maximum deviation was 18 feet per second spread. So a really impressive little rifle, and one that I'm quite looking forward to getting stuck in with on the channel. The aim for the rifle is to do our usual tricks to it, so we'll be putting on a shroud, we'll be making it more efficient, and we'll also be doing a number of other little upgrades, as well as showing a full strip down and reassembly, and just other bits and pieces here and there. The last thing I'll do is just show you some of the things you might not have seen on other channels. So the first thing we'll do is take a look at the barrel and the crown. So the shroud is fitted with a 1/2 inch UNF on the end, although the barrel is threaded M14. Then if we take a look at the crown there, you see it's a very nice formed crown. It does look fairly central. I can't detect any eccentricity on it by eye, but the crown is well formed and it passes the cotton bud test with flying colours. So the cotton bud test, for anyone interested, is you take a cotton bud, put it in the crown there, like so, and then look round the crown to see any sort of little parts of the cotton bud stuck to the end of it. That would indicate that the crown is grabbing the pellet when it comes out the barrel, but in this case it's perfectly formed and the pellet is able to leave the barrel nice and cleanly. Next I'll take the grip off just so you can see that a AR-1 won't fit. So the grip's held on by a single bolt just in the bottom there. And if we take a look at the inletting on the grip, it is fairly simple, so if you had yourself a router or something similar, it would be nice and easy to make yourself a new grip if you wanted to change the original one, but a standard AR grip won't fit straight on the bottom here. So you can see that there. Next up, I'll take this back piece off. We're not going to be doing a full strip down in this video, I just wanted to show you some things that you might not see on other channels. So like the grip, the back piece here is held on by a single screw. Removing that, we can take the back piece off, which houses the magazine carriers, and also this level cover piece here, which goes over the trigger rod. If we take a look at the back block, you can see a lot of similarities between this rifle and the Uragan 2. Although that's not surprising, as apparently the designer of this rifle and the Uragan 2 are the same person. So here we have it. At the back here we have our hammer spring adjuster, and if you need to adjust that for any reason, remove or loosen this little locking screw. The hammer spring adjuster can be changed, so power up or down if you need to go either way can be done and then locked off again using that screw there. So there we have it. Another nice feature that I forgot to mention earlier is the fact that this rifle has a little cocking indicator. So when the rifle is cocked, this little red piece at the back here pops out the back, so you can tell if the rifle is cocked or not. But there we have it. That's pretty much going to do it for this video, so I hope this has been useful or interesting. Lots of other stuff to come on this rifle. We'll be doing our usual stuff to it. But with that said, that's going to about do it for this one, guys. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.